Breaking news, a warning from President Obama and a thank you from the president-elect. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Trump telling those at his thank you rally in Florida that they stood up to global special interests.
With your votes, the great citizens of this country declared to the world that from now on, it's going to be America first. America first.
Meanwhile, President Obama, for the first time, publicly blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin for Russia's hacking of the election.
Not much happens in Russia without Vladimir Putin. This happened at the highest levels of the Russian government.
The president also saying he privately warned Putin to stop the hacking or there would be serious consequences. There's a whole lot to get to in this hour. I want to begin with senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta, who is in Orlando with the president-elect, White House correspondent Michelle Kaczynski, and senior political analyst David Gergen, an advisor to four presidents. Also with us, political commentator Ryan Lizza, Washington correspondent for The New Yorker. Good evening to all of you. Jim, I'm going to start with you. While everyone is talking about the Russian hacking, Donald Trump is talking to supporters in Florida tonight. Did he mention Russia?
He did not, Don. Perhaps it's a return to the holiday spirit, the spirit of the season. There was this back and forth that was going on over the last 24 hours between Donald Trump and Josh Earnest, and then Kellyanne Conway jumped into the fray earlier today. But at that press conference, you heard President Obama decline to really go after Donald Trump. He just merely suggested that the president-elect get on board with this probe into Russian hacking. But at this rally here in Orlando, one of these thank you tour rallies, Donald Trump did not continue the fight. He did not keep this fight going, but he did take issue with the policy towards Syria. He offered a different proposal, one he's been talking about over the last couple of days, for establishing safe zones in Syria. It sounds very familiar. It sounds a little bit like his proposal for a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. Here's more of what he had to say.
We're going to build safe zones. We're not having them come over. We're going to build safe zones in Syria. We're going to build safe zones. And we're going to get the Gulf states to pay for the safe zones. And we're going to try and help people.
Now, Don, before people think it's totally kumbaya at these thank you tour rallies, there were chants of lock her up and other things here with the crowd in Orlando. And at one point, Donald Trump tried to suggest that his crowd start toning it down. He said, you know, during the election, during the primaries, he said you were vicious, you were violent, even used the word violent. But he basically said it's now time for his supporters to calm down and basically get with the spirit of unity that he was talking about at this rally tonight.
Interesting. Michelle, at his final press conference, the president talked at length about the Russian cyber attack and who he says directed it. Listen to this.
Not much happens in Russia without Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is a pretty hierarchical operation. Last I checked, there's not a lot of debate and democratic deliberation, particularly when it comes to policies directed at the United States.
What else did he say about it, Michelle?
Well, he kind of wanted to go through everything. I mean, this is really his chance to take his time. This press conference lasted an hour and a half, and it was mostly on Russia. And he wanted to give the explanations that he wanted to get out there. I mean, he went through the fact that when the U.S. does respond proportionally to this hack, that Russia will get the message, that more detail will come out in this full report, that this full review that he has ordered, and the report will be ready, of course, before the inauguration. And some of this will be made public, maybe not everything, but he made it clear that there would be action taken and that Russia would get that message. But he also wanted to defend how his administration handled this, explain the reasoning behind it, defend the FBI and when they named and shamed Russia, also how they conducted their investigation. But I thought it was particularly interesting when at one point the president was asked, well, can you assure the American public that this was a fair and free election? And really, the best that he could do, the most that he could assure, was that the voting process was not tampered with, Don.
Interesting as well. David, the president defended the intelligence agency's findings and warned that hyperpartisanship is poisoning our politics. Listen to this.
Over a third of Republican voters approve of Vladimir Putin. the former head of the KGB, Ronald Reagan would roll over in his grave. And how did that happen? It happened in part because for too long, everything that happens in this town, everything that's said, is seen through the lens of, does this help or hurt us relative to Democrats or relative to President Obama? And unless that changes, we're going to continue to be vulnerable to foreign influence.
David, is partnership making us vulnerable, partisanship, I'd say, making us vulnerable? And what would Ronald Reagan think of Republicans warming to Vladimir Putin?
I think partisanship has made us more vulnerable to believe the worst of the other side, and that's the president's. The president started out this press conference today with a recitation of his accomplishments over the past 8 years, and I must say they sounded impressive. But he ended it with enormous frustration that the political culture has gotten worse, and he's quite frustrated, obviously, that the president-elect, Donald Trump, has more faith in Vladimir Putin than he does in our intelligence agencies, starting with the CIA. And that, he is arguing, has opened people up to the idea, to approving of Putin, though his numbers have gone up steadily. So his approval rating in this unscientific poll, to be sure, but important that his approval rating is up to 37%. And I can tell you that's a lot higher than most Republicans hold Hillary Clinton in approval. So the president is worried about something that has seeped into our culture, now is overwhelming us, and has made us open to the idea that, this thug, Vladimir Putin, may actually have something to be positive about him.
Yeah. Ryan, I want to read something. This is a memo from John Brennan, the CIA director, an internal memo to his staff assuring them that the CIA, the FBI, and the Director of National Intelligence are all on the same page when it comes to the hacking, and that it was meant to help Trump. And here's what he wrote. He said, earlier this week I met separately with Director FBI Comey and DNI, I mean the Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, and there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, intent of Russian interference in our presidential election. Why do you think Director Brennan wrote this to his staff?
I think it's very clear why he wrote it. There were leaks from the Hill that some in the FBI did not agree with the CIA's assessment that the intent of the operation, which was the news over the last couple of weeks, the intent was not just to cause chaos in our election, but specifically to help Donald Trump win. That was the CIA assessment. Brennan is a fierce defender of the CIA, and it was his view that the leaks clearly were incorrect, and he wanted to make it public that the CIA and the FBI and the DNI all agree now on the intent of this Russian propaganda effort. Look, a senior intelligence official said to me this week, one thing you do not want to do is get into a leak war. These guys do for a living. And I'm not accusing Brennan of playing politics here. I think he was correcting the record. But I think Trump is making a mistake if he's going to be as cavalier and dismissive of the CIA. Those guys don't mess around. So I think there's two things here going on. I think one, Brennan genuinely wanted to set the record straight, but I also think this is a little bit of a brushback and a pushback by the CIA against President-elect Trump, who was very dismissive of the CIA in a public statement the other day.
Jim, to that attitude that Ryan is describing there, sort of cavalier attitude, Donald Trump and his transition team have been saying that these hacking revelations are politically motivated, and today he tweeted this. He says, are we talking about the same cyber attack where it was revealed that head of DNC illegally gave Hillary the questions to the debate? Is he saying that this attack might have been good by tweeting something like that?
He is suggesting that perhaps the disclosure of this information that came through the hacking of Democratic Party emails, yes, served some kind of greater good. Certainly served his greater good in terms of getting elected. But I will tell you, Don, I did talk to a transition source who says that the president-elect is concerned about these accusations of Russian hacking, but it is unclear at this point, and that's why it would be great if we could have a press conference where we're going to ask the president-elect this this question. We just don't know how far Donald Trump wants to take this. You heard the president today encourage the president-elect to get on board with this probe into the hacking, but we just have not heard what Donald Trump thinks about that, how far he thinks this should go, and so on. But what I think was an encouraging sign today is you did not hear a tit-for-tat between the President of the United States and the President-elect over all of this. You heard the President try to lower the temperature. You saw the President-elect here tonight not really get back into this back and forth with Josh Earnest and so on. And I think that's what people expect during this transition process. It's a long tradition to have the incoming administration working with the outgoing administration to ensure the smooth transition of power. And it just seemed like all of that was really in jeopardy in these last 24 hours. And it appears cooler heads have prevailed. But no question, earlier today, Congressman Chris Collins, Republican, who is a Trump surrogate, see him on our air all the time, was saying, well, the worst that happened is that the truth came out. So there are certainly Republicans and certainly people inside the Trump camp who feel like these hacks served their purpose. It was a means to an end. What we need to hear at this point is whether or not the president-elect would condemn that, and we just have not gotten that kind of response from Donald Trump. He hasn't been asked that question in the few interviews that he does, and he's not opening it up to questions at a news conference. We just don't know where he stands on that. Until he answers that question, there's going to be more questions to be asked about his perspective on all this.
Jim and the rest of the panel, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just ahead, President Obama's comments belittling not having hope feels like. We'll talk about what she means.
Where will the lead take us today? Straight to the source.
Would Israel be willing to go along with those demands?
To a side you haven't seen.
That sounds a young man's game.
All the way to the heart of a problem.
What is going on in Ferguson, Missouri, in downtown America?
Maybe all the way to the president.
Do you think you were naive back then?
The Lead with Jake Tapper. Weekdays at 4.